This episode spoke to me a lot because our guest, Simone, literally reminded me how important it is to just find the positivity of the situation. I feel like you're all going to feel her energy immediately. She was like a ray of sunshine. And I think it's a different energy than I think we've ever had on the podcast in terms of like perspective.
And I think it was not just positivity, but realness to that
Mm,
positivity, in that it's not just pretending like things are great. Sometimes it's acknowledging things that are really hard and
hmm
really suck, but it doesn't mean that you have to stay in that place, and that you can continue to support yourself and love yourself through those really hard periods.
exactly. And I would say, especially like taking the moments where you can create a little joy for yourself and doing it, even though it may feel a little silly or like, why am I doing this? Because you need it, right? Because you need it.
Hi, Simone. Welcome to the Medical Detectives.
Hello, how are you all
Hello.
doing?
Welcome. You excited to tell your
Yeah.
story?
Yeah, I'm stoked to tell my story. I've been from the start of all of this, I was very much like, okay, how can I use my story to help others? Because the juicier it got, the more I was like, there's some nuggets in here that I think can serve other people.
Ooh, I love nuggets in any form,
Yeah.
educational, chicken
Food.
based.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if it's
Yeah,
a nugget, I probably like it.
same, same.
Well, Simone, can you start us off with what was life like for you when you were younger?
Very, very active. I was an athlete. That was probably my number one identity. So I was playing most every sport. I used to find joy out of I would go outside and I would run laps around the house. So I was very, very active.
So
I
very active and healthy throughout that time?
Yeah, other than my period has always been a struggle for me. I started my period when I was in the third grade, so I was around 9 years old. So earlier than most, and they were always extremely painful. And I, having grown up in the South in a Southern Baptist church, was told that the sin of Eve is not only just that pregnancy itself, the birthing of a child is painful, but an extension of that is having painful periods. So when I would go to gynecologists and tell them of these painful periods, it was often downplayed. And then sometimes there was religion kind of brought into it jokingly, which was like, well, this is just the curse of Eve that you have to deal with. Periods aren't supposed to be fun. So I was downplayed for years and gaslit to the point that I just thought I was being weak about it. And I was still gaslighting myself until 2 years ago, when one alarming day in November 2022, where I was like, this isn't good. So, context, I was living out of a van full time. So, I'd been living out of it for 2 years at that point, traveling around, just enjoying the United States and parts of Mexico. So, in November of 2022, I wasn't supposed to be on my period, but I started bleeding and it was black tar. And not the like, oh, it's some old blood. It was legitimate, like tar like black that was just coming out. So, it was very jelly and not almost to the point I was like, I don't know if this is blood. And so I was in the van at the time. That happened when I was in Arizona and I was about to go to Mexico. So I decided to just put a pin in it and say, okay, we're just going to note this, which I did, go down to Mexico for 3 months. And when I was in Mexico, things started getting worse. Like I started bleeding at times that weren't my period, cramping, more black tar kind of spread throughout. So I decided when I got back into the States, I made an appointment with a OBGYN in Colorado Springs because I knew I had a friend that lived in Pueblo. They agreed that if I needed surgery, I could stay with them for that time because I
You
didn't
are
want to recover in a
so
van.
freaking brave. Like you're
Thanks.
like, oh, I've got tar coming out of my lady bits. I'm just gonna go to Mexico anyway. I'm just gonna keep
Yeah,
doing it.
well, to be fair, I think some of my response was a little bit of like shock and coping, like I was trying to just
Mm.
ignore it a bit. Like I remembered it. I put a pin in it because I'm in my van. I don't have access, and I would have to kind of uproot myself to get to a place. And I was
Mhm.
excited to go to Mexico. I'd already paid for the insurance to go there. So I think a little bit of me was like, okay, this might just be a one and done thing. So that was another thing, is when you are gaslit so much by the medical system and you go in and they keep telling you you're normal, you're normal. You're like, I don't want to accrue another medical bill to be told I'm normal and that I'm just over exaggerating this blood, right? But again, I flounce on down to Mexico and didn't necessarily have a big episode like that again, where the black tar showed up. It would be little bits, maybe fragments here and there, but I was like, whatever. And then that's when I did have, it was March, as we were talking about taxes. I don't know why I remember this so vividly. And all of a sudden, I just had this, it was as if I just got a whoosh throughout my whole body. And I became very, very, very irritated for no reason. I'm sitting on the beaches of Mexico. Like nothing had happened. There was nothing that was triggering it. And I was like, uh, everyone, I gotta go to my, something's going on. I gotta go to my van. So I go in there and I look and I'm bleeding profusely, just
Whoa.
consistently.
So when you say irritated, like mad, like you want to punch
Yes.
somebody?
Yeah. Like I just felt very like very rage. And I knew, I was like, this feels very hormony, but different than usual. And it was like this. It just click, whoosh. And I felt it was as if it was just this whole sheet and it just, everything changed. And I go in my van, and it wasn't a feeling, that feeling you get when you're like, I just started my period, like you feel the gates. I didn't feel that feeling
Mhm.
necessarily. So I go in my van, I am like, well, let me just go. I had to pee. So I go to the bathroom and I was bleeding, and that felt alarming because it wasn't near my period time. It was enough blood to not, it wasn't, I would not call it spotting. It was enough to put a tampon in and a pad. But again, I'm in Mexico. So I immediately called that night. I called, I was looking for OBGYNs in the Colorado Springs area, knowing that my van was going to be traveling toward Colorado when
Yeah.
I left Mexico. And I got on the schedule for May 10th, and I go in and see that OBGYN. And I said, I want to pursue this surgery to see about endometriosis.
Mhm.
Because at that point, I had done some research on the symptoms of endometriosis. I thought maybe it was to blame for some of this bleeding, this irregular bleeding.
What is the
And
symptoms of endometriosis?
Endometriosis is when the endometrial tissue, which is the lining on the inside of your uterus, is found outside of your uterus. And so this is the tissue that is responsible for having a period, right? For shedding and the normal cramping that people may experience, but it's outside of that uterus. So it can happen in times where you're not having your period. It can cause abnormal bleeding, abnormal cramping, discomfort because it's located in areas outside where it should be.
yes. So when I would come back from Mexico in May of 2023, I then travel my way out of Colorado Springs to see this OBGYN that had good reviews. So I go see her. She does say, yes, this aligns with endometriosis symptoms. The gold standard for diagnosing endometriosis as it currently stands is a diagnostic laparoscopy. So it is surgery, there's anesthesia involved. There is no blood test currently that will determine, there's no scan. Some doctors can pick up on endometriosis via an MRI, but it's not consistent enough. So that's why diagnostic laparoscopy is the gold standard approach. So we could do the laparoscopy. I agree to that. I go have the surgery with her June 10th, I believe, of 2023. And I wake up being told I have no endometriosis, and that they did find 3 to 2 centimeter cyst on my left fallopian tube. So I woke up being told, yeah, we found some things. We burned the barotubular cyst off. We also saw they did find a lot of scarring in my abdomen, which thought it was weird. I hadn't had any prior abdominal surgeries before, no abdominal injury, anything. And she just says, you don't have endo. I mean, we took the barotubular cyst, not really sure why you're having pain. And I'm like, okay, so they didn't really give me answers. I think I intuitively did not believe them. And the reason why is she took really great photographs. And when I looked at the pictures and I saw my uterus and my very enlarged fallopian tube and my left ovary, and you could compare them, like, my left fallopian tube was, like, 10 times the size of my right fallopian tube, and I asked about it. I was like, "What's going on there?" And she's like, "I don't really know." And I just remember being like, "This just doesn't feel medical. This feels like a joke." So that was very frustrating, and I'm continuing to have this pain, and at the same time all this is going on, I'm getting monthly ovarian cysts on my left ovary as well.
Wait, so you're
So
getting a cyst every month?
every month it's about 5 centimeters and will rupture. And because they kept finding these large cysts on my left ovary, we would do follow-up ultrasounds to see if they were shrinking. Well, 2 months post-op, I go in and have another ultrasound, and they find like a 5.5 centimeter cyst on my left ovary
A new
and
one.
a new one that had popped up. So I begged them to take it out. I'm like, I'm living in a van full time. I'm driving. I'm single at the time. I cannot put people in when these cysts rupture, they rupture, and I'm putting other people at danger on the road.
Whoa,
This
whoa,
cyst needs to come out.
what happens when explain the process of this rupturing? So you have a cyst inside, and
Yes.
then what happens when they rupture? Like, what's the experience like?
Yeah, so and it's different for everybody. But I actually can feel the cyst rupture. There will be like almost like a pop, and I wouldn't it's not a stabbing pain immediately, but as the contents of the cyst flood, which is blood,
Mhm.
because mine are they've all been hemorrhagic cysts, and this is also an important part of this narrative in the future,
Mhm.
is that blood then dumps into my abdomen. I go completely white. I almost black out. And I either have to throw up or I have to go have a bowel movement. And it's like immediately I have to do that. Like there's no like I can hold it back.
This
And
is
that's because when blood enters the abdominal cavity, it's very irritating, and they call it peritonitis. And
oh,
that's an irritation pain
Mm,
inside the abdominal cavity. So the
mm.
fact that you were having ruptured blood causing this irritation, there's no wonder why you were in so much pain.
Yeah, so it'd be burning. It was never I wouldn't say it was stabbing pain, but I could feel it localized on the side in
mhm.
which the cyst would rupture. And I would just be sitting there eating dinner, grading papers, and all of a sudden I would just be like, "Oh no." Like, I mean, it's hard. It almost feels like you're dying a bit because you're
Mm.
just
Like a
like,
feeling
you
of
know,
dread.
yeah, and you don't have control. But it's also just like I'm about to black out. And I'm by myself. I'm living in a van full time, like out in BLM land, doing my thing. So when I went in after my first laparoscopy and they had found this 5.5 centimeter cyst, I said, "You have to take it out because I can't keep living like the life I live. I could put other people in danger. I could
Mhm.
wreck my van. I could kill somebody." I mean, it was just very because I've done the whole like wait for it to shrink and mine don't do that. They rupture. And so she goes in, we do the second emergency diagnostic lap the next morning at 8 a.m. And she goes in and I wake up and she goes, "You have stage 4 endometriosis." I don't know how I missed it. The goal was to remove the cyst that was there, which she did. And in the interim, I think while she was in there, she was looking around. And then that's what she saw, the endometriosis.
What?
Yeah.
She just like low key, like, how many times had she been up in there at this point?
This was her second time. And if it wouldn't have been for me literally in their office crying, begging them to take me into surgery, and thankfully they agreed to it. I might still to this day, I mean, maybe not to this day, but it would have prolonged everything. So I wake up being told, she's like, "You have stage 4 endo, deep infiltrating on your bladder." Because of the surgery we did, I didn't feel comfortable taking it out, but she put me on some drugs to suppress it. I then decided because of how she missed, like how I asked her, I said,
The
I'm just
trust was
curious
gone.
from the first surgery to the second, how did you miss stage 4? The argument that she gave me was that sometimes it's dormant and when you go in, it might not be seen, but when you're on your period, for example, because it's fueled by estrogen. And then I said, "Well, then why didn't you tell me I should have scheduled my surgery when I was supposed to be on my period?" Like, that feels a little bit unethical. If that's your argument, then it's your ethical duty to tell me that as a patient so I can schedule appropriately to make sure you find it. Like, I didn't know this. She was like, "Well, it could have been that maybe, I don't know, maybe I didn't look at your bladder as well as I should have." And I was just like, okay, I don't really trust the fact that by a whoopsie event, you found this endo. That's when I got on all the Facebook groups, did all this digging and research to find out, oh, if you suspect endo, make sure you're going to an endometriosis trained surgeon
Yeah.
because it just increases your likelihood. I mean, they've been through 2 years of training, literally teaching them how to identify the various strands of endo too. So I just decided on that whim. I was like, love ya, but I'm going to find somebody else. That's when I found Dr. Muldoon, who is a linchpin in this entire story and truly who saved my life.
We love a doctor
Um,
advocate. We love a doctor advocate.
At the core of who she is an advocate, and she just so happens to be a doctor. I found her and did a telehealth, sent my images in. They took a lot of photos, obviously, in the surgery. And, she was like, yeah, this is classic endo. She even said, she's like, I don't know how she missed this, but whatever. That's a conversation for another day. And I was like, okay, cool. So we decided to go in, and both my prior doctor and Muldoon, when looking at the images of not only the endo, but of my uterus, were like, this is pretty textbook adenomyosis. And at this point, I am so exhausted from this journey and just want to be pain free
What's
that I just.
adno?
So just like when we were talking about how the endometrial lining, those cells are on the inside of the cavity, right?
Yep.
Adenomyosis is when those cells infiltrate the muscular wall of the uterus.
Okay.
So the uterus is a thick organ with a hollow inside. You have the thin lining of the hollow inside, that's the endometrium, and then you have a thick wall surrounding that endometrium, which is primarily made of muscle. So those cells that are on the lining are not supposed to be inside the wall. And in
Gotcha.
adenomyosis, those cells have now infiltrated kind of throughout that thick wall.
Gotcha.
Yeah, with adenomyosis, the only way they can diagnose that is with a hysterectomy. They take the uterus out and they test the entire uterus. So I just decided then that this was my third surgery I was going into in 5 months, and I was over it. And I didn't want to risk going in and doing the endo excision, waking up and still feeling awful, and then having to tee up a fourth surgery, which was the hysterectomy. So at that point, it was like, I've never really wanted kids, just go ahead and take the uterus. So the surgery that I have is a hysterectomy. When we went in, I ended up losing my left ovary because of the immense amount. There was irreversible damage because of the amount of cysts that had ruptured. So I wake up from that surgery and I really do feel good. They take the uterus out and they test the entire uterus, and it came back negative. So I lost my uterus for no reason. And actually, when I got that news, it was pretty neutral. I was just more pissed that I had to lose my left ovary, because now we're talking about like estrogen production and throwing me early 30s into early menopause. I was more annoyed that it was irreversible damage to it. So I feel good for about 2 months. I mean, I woke up almost 4 days post hysterectomy. I was sleeping on my stomach because I think I was walking a mile every day. I just felt amazing for about a month, 2 months. And then 2 months post-op from that, I had probably my worst ovarian cyst rupture ever. I mean, to the point at this point, I'm living with my boyfriend now. I shouldn't say at the time. We are still living together and love each other a lot. So I'm living with him, and the way ovarian cysts can rupture is like a lot of times for me, it was exercise, like via sex. And so we had just had intercourse, and I'm just laying there, and all of a sudden I was like, I don't feel so good. So I go downstairs. I'm like, I just need to go drink some water. And I did black out on the floor, middle of the winter. I think it was February at this point, January. And he comes downstairs and just he thinks I'm dead. And I wake up to him being like, and I'm just like, oh. And I think I said, I go, it's just an ovarian cyst. Like, so casually. And he's just like, what? And he's like, are you okay? What's going on? And I was like, let's just give it an hour. And within an hour, I was a lot better. My blood pressure had, my coloring had gotten better. And he's just like, what is, and I tell him, like, this is what it is. If this happens in the future, this is how to go about it.
Can I ask just one question? Had you ever had cysts on the right side? Had they always just been on the left?
My first sister I ever got was on the right when I was 27 years old.
Okay.
And it was a one and done. And then all of a sudden, when I turned 32, 33, I just started getting like rapid fire cyst on my left ovary, which
To
all
the
of this
left,
will
but
make
not the right.
sense. Yeah, all of this will start
But then
making
you
sense.
now you no longer have a left, right? You only have the right.
Yeah, which is
Okay.
where the mystery keeps getting crazier because what happened? So there's two things kind of going on. I'm likely like my hormones. They told me they said usually when we do take one ovary, your hormones get a little crazy. So
Oh, yeah.
it is normal that you could get a cyst because of that.
Mhm.
So I told Dr. Muldoon, I'm like, cool. I can work through this. Let's just give my body time to adjust. I started working out again, getting my body back in check. But at this point, so the cyst happens, and then a month later, I just start going downhill again, like brain fog, major fatigue, pelvic pain on the right side again, more cysts starting to rupture. The symptoms just felt like they had shifted a bit. I was getting the POTS like symptoms, like heart palpitations, super dizzy, super lightheaded, very nauseous, having a hard time eating, loss of appetite, left flank pain, blood and protein in my urine, recurrent UTIs for no apparent reason, chest pains. I mean, I felt like my body was breaking down because it was like the symptoms were all, it wasn't this localized thing. It just felt like my body was shutting down. And at the time, I did not label myself as a medical mystery. I think some of it was coping because if I actually identified as that and accepted that I was a medical mystery, then I think there would have been way more hopelessness present. And I just kept messaging doctors asking about this. Like, I was just trying to keep hope alive as much as I could. And Dr. Muldoon was a lot of the reason why it stayed alive because she took my case and posted it on a gynecological surgeon forum. So she was really trying to help me get to the bottom of it. And so she helped stoke my hope because she was like, we're going to figure it out. So because of her, I never felt like I was a medical mystery. I just felt like, okay, well, maybe this is outside of gynecology, but she's going to get me into the right system, right? So I go back to Dr. Muldoon and I'm like, you know what? I don't care about medical menopause. Just take the right ovary out. If this is what my life is going to be like, I will be on HRT for the rest of my life. And she blessings, said, I understand the desperation. Let's
Mhm.
leave no stone unturned because I want to rule some things out before we do that. I'm not saying we won't. I will do whatever you need. And because of that, she had just met another doctor. Just a couple months prior, she had met an interventional radiologist. They started creating a professional relationship. So the reason why this timeline matters is Dr. Muldoon did not know Dr. Spencer when I originally did my hysterectomy. So she didn't even know to say, hey, before we do this, go get this checked out. In between November 23 and July of 24, she meets Dr. Spencer. So when I come back to her and I'm like, this is going on again, she's like, hey, I just met Dr. Spencer. I just learned about vascular compressions. And that these vascular compressions sometimes mimic gynecological symptoms, specifically May-Thurner syndrome, which is a compression of the left iliac vein that stretches between your belly button and your left hip. So it's a pretty long and pretty massive, I mean, it's pretty big vein, and also some other vascular compressions that are usually correspond. So if you have one vascular compression, you often have multiple, is what I've
So
learned.
a vascular compression is just like a constraint on the vein?
Yeah, so something is cutting off the flow to some percentage,
Oh,
whether it's
gotcha.
pinching it, so there is some blood flow going through, but not a lot. Some of it is completely cutting it off. She had said, you know what, I'm really thinking this could be vascular. Let's have you come in. We'll do an ultrasound on your ovary, just see what that looks like. We spoke a little bit in person. I got the referral to see Dr. Spencer. That was another like 2 to 3 month wait. That was just kind of like I called every day, every other day, just very kindly asking Leah, the front desk person, like, "It's me again. Is there a cancellation?" And was able to get in a week earlier. But some of it, I was so anxious because I remember thinking almost all the pennies were in the vascular basket at that point because Muldoon was like, I don't want to remove your right ovary. I will if we need to, but I really, really don't want to. And her intuition was, I don't think this is ovary related. And I don't think the answer is just taking the organ. But I remember being like, what if I go to my vascular appointment and they say everything's fine, which a lot of doctors had said. So I was very anxious. I was losing sleep because I was just like, if this isn't it, then I don't know where the path leads after this. And that's where I started feeling the hopelessness. So I go see Dr. Spencer. My appointment was at like 3:15 and I didn't leave till 6:30. And we did a ultrasound just to see if I had any vascular insufficiency. So we do that. I go into the room, wait on the nurse practitioner to come in, and she just starts educating me on these vascular compressions. She tells me about May Thurner. She tells me about Nutcracker Syndrome, which is a compression of the left renal vein. In the vascular compression world, there are about 5 different compressions that you can have. And Nutcracker is the most serious. It's the one you really don't want. And I remember being like, "Why are you telling me about Nutcracker syndrome?" But I also remember being like, "Okay, they're being thorough. This is fine." And she's like, "And for Nutcracker syndrome, if you are diagnosed with Nutcracker, then there's 4 treatment options, but the 2 that we recommend are more invasive, which is you would lose your kidney or relocate." And I remember being like, "That sucks for those people." Like that's gosh, because I was just going in thinking it was just May Thurner. So I'm like, "I don't know why she's telling me about Nutcracker." And she was like, "Okay, well, let's look at what Dr. Spencer had to say about your scans." And she's like reading through it and she's like, "Okay, so your May Thurner it was kind of inconclusive. We couldn't tell." She was like, "But you have a severe case of Nutcracker syndrome." I remember the moment she diagnosed me, I just got this overwhelming feeling, just started crying in the office because I was both relieved, but I also knew, oh, this likely means I gotta lose my kidney or relocate it, so this journey's just starting. Like, I was thinking, "Can we just get to the end? Are we at the end?" And it felt like it was just revving up again. And it was almost that, like, I just got done running a marathon, and now you're telling me I have to run another one, and I don't think I have what it takes to do this. But you don't have an option, and that's the most exhausting thing. You're in a tunnel with no way to turn back, and the only way out is to go through this extremely scary surgery. And that's when I think it actually was, because this whole time I was like, "Why are you talking to me about Nutcracker? That sucks for these people." And then in the next breath was, "You have a severe case of this." And I was like, "Oh, I'm one of those people." And I remember getting this. I go, "Oh, okay." And then I went into shock. I just immediately went into the grieving phase and I just was shocked. I remember bargaining a little bit because I grew up really religious, and even though I've been out of it for 15 years, you're kind of like, I was raised in a religion that I remember when Katrina got hit with a hurricane, a lot of chatter in the church was like, "Well, it's because they practice voodoo down there and that's just God spiting them," like that narrative. So I was like, "Oh no, God's spiting me, and this is
Well,
because I walked
again,
away from the church."
you were told that your uterine issues were just
It was Eve,
because you
so
were a lady.
yeah, exactly. But there was some hope that I wouldn't have to lose my kidney because the scans I did aren't always the best diagnostic tool. So I had to do a diagnostic surgery for them to really know for sure. So I got scheduled to come back in and do that. And I went in telling her, if I have May Thurner, while you're doing the diagnostic venogram, which is they put you under, they do anesthesia so that they either go through your leg, a vein that's in your leg or in your neck. And I said, if you go in and you see that compression, I'm so done with not feeling well, shove a stent in there. So she goes in, she does the venogram to check for 2 things, to check if I have May Thurner syndrome, which I did. She stented that, and she checked for Nutcracker syndrome. So I do the diagnostic venogram plus the stent placement for May Thurner. I wake up, I'm told that I had severe May Thurner. We did the stent, and that I only had a 49% compression of the left renal vein. Thus, she proceeded to say that she didn't think any of my symptoms were due to Nutcracker. We'll see where the cards fall, obviously. So I was ecstatic. I was like, this could be a one and done, and I can have my life back. I got about 2 good weeks out of that. And then all of a sudden, classic Nutcracker syndrome symptoms started to happen. And this is kind of like with the plumbing system, if you think about it. The theory was that if they open up the line, the left iliac line, that pressure might actually open up the
Reopen.
left renal vein a little bit more, so I could avoid a very invasive surgery for Nutcracker syndrome. And 2 weeks later, I started getting classic Nutcracker syndrome symptoms.
What are classic Nutcracker syndromes?
Yeah, left flank pain, either micro or macro traces of blood in your urine, protein in your urine, chronic UTIs, So my symptoms start getting worse after May Thurner. So what's happening with the left renal vein compression is you have your kidney and the left renal vein's coming out here. Well, the nutcracker part is you have the aorta and the superior mesenteric artery. Normal anatomy provides enough space for your left renal vein to thread
Yes.
that needle. Nutcracker anatomy is this is cracking. This is like a nutcracker, right? Like we're cracking a
It
nut.
literally looks like you're cracking somebody's
Yes,
nuts by what you're
exactly.
doing right now.
Yeah,
So it makes
I'm.
sense.
That's what I'm saying. So I had a 49% compression, which is considered moderate.
Hmm.
So 51% of my blood is returning back to my heart.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the rest of that blood was pooling, and when I had a uterus, that's where it was going. What we found out, and this is where I said, remember the peritubal cyst on my left fallopian tube, the chronic ovarian cyst, hemorrhagic
Yes.
ovarian cyst rupturing on my left ovary. What was going on is there is from the left renal vein, there's another vein that comes down that's the left gonadal vein, left ovarian vein. So what
Okay.
was happening is because of this compression, the blood has to go somewhere. Thank God it
So
doesn't
it was
just kill
shooting
you.
down.
It starts refluxing down my left ovarian vein, into my left ovary, into my left fallopian tube, into my uterus. So the blood, that tar blood that started this whole journey, this black tar blood that started this whole journey was likely left renal vein, was like kidney blood that was being refluxed into my reproductive system.
So curious, is endometriosis a symptom of Nutcracker syndrome?
So that is it's not a direct symptom. There's not a lot they know about vascular compression, especially Nutcracker. There are working theories out there that there is a relationship between vascular compressions and endometriosis. But there just hasn't been enough research, unfortunately. And that's why so many people have such a hard time getting diagnosed with these compressions. So we don't know for how long, how many likely years, my body has been rerouting this blood using my reproductive system as a host. And to a point that it got so bad that I lost my organs because of it. All of that damage was because of Nutcracker syndrome, was because of the reflux blood from the left renal vein being compressed.
Using
When
your uterus as a host.
Yeah, using my reproductive system as a host. When we took away the host, that blood had to find new routes to go. And that is when classic Nutcracker symptoms started to arise. So I was getting headaches, major tension along the base of my neck, my traps, and I wasn't even working out. It was just like I couldn't get enough massages to keep my body. It was just in fight or flight mode. I had collateral veins that were working their way into my chest, so I went to the ER. I was having pulmonary embolism scares. Like I woke up at 4 in the morning with just this major chest pain, wasn't able to breathe really well. If I stood for too long, sat for too long, if I had to go grocery shopping, I had to get one of the motorized carts. I was just losing so much of my life and who I was. So that's when I decided to start advocating for myself. I went on a Nutcracker Facebook page and found out that there's 4 different surgeries you can do for Nutcracker.
Okay.
2 of them are less invasive, but the less invasive options also have a higher failure rate. So I decided to go with the more invasive option. I chose the auto transplant route. The reason why is I just wanted to, everybody has their reasons. I just wanted to give myself the best chance, keep both kidneys since my right one's a little bit weaker. We went what's called a traditional auto transplant, which is that they moved my left kidney to my right side of my abdomen. So I now have 2 right kidneys. Um,
Whoa.
yeah, so we'll
I
get
didn't
to
even know
that.
that was possible.
Yeah.
How does moving a kidney solve the problem with the vein being pinched?
So
Because
what happens is it takes it out from, bloop, we're going to take this out and then relocate it to somewhere where there isn't a compression
So
option.
you're moving the organ and its vasculature with it, and you have to hook it up to the right side of the inferior vena cava and the aorta.
that sounds terrifying. Were
Oh,
you panicked going
oh,
through
I
this?
was on heavy anti-anxiety meds, heavy. Like I was Really, I was breaking out in hives. I was having a lot of anxiety attacks.
I don't think we've talked about this yet on the medical detectives, but I think whenever you get a chronic illness, you also kind of get a little bit of mental health issues because it's just not an easy thing to take on. Your whole life
Absolutely.
has to change. Things you thought you knew about your body, you don't. And so it makes sense that your body and your mind would both struggle to catch up, right?
Absolutely. The grief that's involved. We don't talk about that grief that's there, the anger that comes with it, right? That like, why me?
The mourning your previously, healthy body.
Absolutely. I told Kyle, I said, whatever is about to happen to me is going to change me for the rest of my life. And I still grieve a lot. Gosh, this is going to make me cry. Who I was prior to all of this was uh, very vivacious, very active. I mean, my mother would just be like, you give me most of my gray hairs because I was ice climbing and skiing and doing shit. And I don't want to sit here and say that part of me is gone, but when you have stuff like this happen, and a lot of people listening can understand, you're not invincible anymore. You realize that you really don't have control like you thought you did. So I do the traditional kidney auto transplant at University of Wisconsin Health in Madison, Wisconsin. So I had to travel from the Denver area up to Madison and be there for approximately 3 to 4 weeks. And that's including surgery. That's including the time I was inpatient, which for me was 9 days. And then I had to stay in the Airbnb until I was discharged at my follow-up appointment, barring that there were no complications that happened. The surgery itself was, I think, around 4 to 5 hours. So the process, too, so people understand, is you can't just go and see a transplant and then be like, yeah, we're going to sign you up for a transplant. So I had to send in my images, and they have every Tuesday at UW Health, they meet as a team and they look at their potential cases, and they'll see the images and they'll either deem you like, no, this isn't Nutcracker, or yes, this seems like Nutcracker. And then you'll make it to stage 2, which is they invite you for an initial consult in person. So I graduate, I get to I felt like I was going through my grad school applications again. Like I was so stoked that I was like, yeah, I made it to stage 2. So I go in, I do a full day of scans, very, very detailed images of your kidneys. And they told me to help them, if we do surgery, it will help them prepare to know what the anatomy is before they go in. So there's no surprises. I also had to meet with a social worker to make sure that I was mentally stable enough for a surgery like this, which I appreciated. And I met with a nutritionist because I had also lost a lot of weight. So they wanted to make sure that I wasn't too frail to do a surgery like this. And then we'll call you a week later after they meet again to say, do we think this person's a viable option? And that's the social worker weighing in, the nutritionist weighing in, the doctor themselves, everybody saying, like, there's got to be a yes across the board for everyone.
Yeah.
So I then get the call saying, congratulations. This is when I got broke out in hives because I was both excited, but I realized the barrel I was staring down. You were accepted and we want to get you on the schedule for surgery. So we drove up to Madison that next month and had the surgery, and it was a very spiritual life awakening experience for me in a lot of ways.
And so now you're how long post-op?
Today is 2 months.
Holy crow. So this is new for you.
This is very new. So I'm 2 months into having 2 right kidneys, and I feel really, really good. The spiritual component of this, and maybe some people that listen to this will understand. Prior to knowing what it feels like for your blood to be corroding you slowly. I mean, it's a slow death. I was in I'm slowly dying.
Yeah.
And I was very aware of it. And so I know what that feels like intimately. To get the organ removed, that now I know what it feels like for my blood to be actually pumping the way it's supposed to without a compression. There's such a beauty in that, meaning that I now understand what blood feels like. Whereas prior, you don't have anything to base it off of because you're just born with your blood doing what it's supposed to do. And so for me, it's I feel the life of it. And so if you don't have that, and I think people with chronic illness can understand that, or maybe can take what I'm saying and specify it to their specific situation, which is I intimately am aware of what life feels like. and what it feels like to be corroding you to death, to now be like, oh, that has been very life-changing for me in a lot of ways.
I just saw this quote. It's actually in response to the viral anglerfish.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, yeah.
okay. And it was how tragic it is, the things we take for granted that others would die for. You know, we take for granted that our blood just pumps normally throughout
Yeah.
our blood.
You're never
throughout our
thinking
body.
about it. You're never
No,
thinking
never.
about
You're
it.
never thinking about that
No.
until it's not working properly.
Yeah, exactly. And that gave me, I mean, one of the things going into the surgery I talked to Kyle about was like, I've accomplished a lot in my 35 years of life, to the point that if I did die, I'd be pretty freaking proud of myself. And I remember waking up and being like, there were a couple loose ends that I was like, if I did die, these would be some small loose ends that I wish I would have tightened up and looked through. So when I got back to Colorado, I contacted some people and said, hey, like, I had some epiphany moments, and these are things I want to start pouring into. And I think that's another thing, gifts that chronic illness can provide, is it makes you look at your life in such a way. Because my whole thing is, when I am on my deathbed, I want to be proud of the values driven life I've done. I want to be proud of the things I have produced were empowering of other people. And that's a lot of the reason why I do like podcasts like this, is maybe my story can empower people to know what surgeons to seek out, what like helps give them voice and to advocate for self. My story is not one story. I posted probably a month after my kidney auto transplant. I actually posted my story. I said, I lost my uterus and left ovary when I really needed a kidney auto transplant. And so many people came out of the woodwork that was like, this happened to me too. People were sharing it. I was doing what Dr. Muldoon did for me, which was advocate for me, to say, leave no stone unturned before you think this is just gynecology related, when it could actually be vascular related.
100%.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that I will break down for people right now, because I think your story is a great example, when you are in a position of you have no idea what is wrong with you, right? Like you don't know, you've seen doctors, you're at dead ends, you don't know what's going on, is to think not so much in terms of symptoms, but in terms of systems. Okay. So is this a problem with my nervous system? Is this a problem with my skeletal system of my bones? Is this a problem with my vasculature? Right. And if you had not, or the doctors who were involved in your case had not been thinking in terms of those lanes, right? In terms of your OBGYN thought, I know someone who is an expert in a totally different system than me. And I'm going to reframe these symptoms. What if it was there in their lane, right? In their system lane. And that's eventually how you solved your problem.
Absolutely.
So I think what people don't realize is that most physicians have a pretty narrow scope of diagnoses that they are comfortable with and have experience with and are on the lookout for.
Yeah.
And we talk about this a lot because a lot of the people we interview have rare diseases. But in the end, when you find that person, that doctor, it honestly does not even matter what the specialty is, right? Or even if they are the end doctor for you, right? In the end, it's finding that person who's going to go the extra mile to say, okay, I'm going to find the person who's going to be your end doctor, right? I'm going to research like what are the new therapies and are there things that we can try? And it's really about finding that person.
And that's what she did. And so if it wasn't for her, truly, I don't know where I would be right now.
Well, Simone, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and be really vulnerable and open up about things that are beyond the medical aspects of your medical mystery. And I think, again, while I would say that I have heard of Nutcracker syndrome before, I certainly was no expert. And I love and appreciate learning about new syndromes and diagnoses and think about how I can be on the lookout for my own patients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad I could bring that. Hopefully others that listen to this podcast, whether for themselves or medical doctors will realize that it's a thing, and I don't believe it's rare. I believe it's just underdiagnosed, and how much could it be the culprit? And if it wasn't for Dr. Muldoon literally saying, I want you to know I hear you, we're going to get this fixed, let's just leave no stone unturned. And so I think that that's my main reason for doing this, is just awareness. So yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for listening to my story, the whole gambit.
The Medical Detectives is a Soft Skills media production, produced by Molly Biscar, sound designed by Shane Drouse. If you have a medical story you'd like to see featured on The Medical Detectives, please email it to stories@themedicaldetectivespodcast.com.
The information provided on The Medical Detectives is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. While we may feature licensed medical professionals, including doctors, we are not your personal doctors, and no doctor-patient relationship is established by listening to this podcast or interacting with our content. All discussions are general in nature and may not apply to your specific health situation. Always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare professional before making any medical decisions or taking any action based on the content of this podcast. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking treatment because of something you have heard on this show. If you are experiencing a medical emergency, please contact emergency services immediately or consult a qualified healthcare provider.